Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org. Hi, this is Bill Kenower for Author Magazine, and today we're at the Pacific Northwest Writers Association's Writers Cottage in Gilman Village in Issaquah, Washington, with J. Anderson Coates, author of R is for Rebel. Jillian, welcome to Author.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
You've published 3 books now, 3 novels for young readers, young adults. But my guess is, if you're like a lot of the writers I know, your writing journey began a long time ago, and if I'm guessing, it probably began in your childhood?
It did, yes.
Yeah.
I was one of those kids that wrote stories in crayon.
Crayon?
Yes, I still have them. They're illustrated poorly, like little kids do.
You did the illustration.
I did.
You didn't
yes,
hire
I did.
an illustrator.
No. And my parents saved them for me, so I still have them. And I think I was probably 8 or 9 when I realized I could lie to adults and get away with it. And that was really where my fictional world opened up a little bit there, you know.
I've heard that that's one of the sort of creation myths of the writing world, which is that some do it through lying, that you understand that there's a sort of, I don't want to say fun, but writing is lying in that way. You're not telling the absolute truth. But when you had to lie to adults, didn't you have to sort of find the truth behind the lie for it to be convincing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had to be very, very close enough to the truth that you didn't forget and mix up your facts. But it had to feel real. And I think that that's kind of true in fiction too, is it has to feel real in whatever context that you are creating and inventing, even if you are using things from the real world. It still has to be real without being real.
I've had this conversation with other writers about this subject, and I know it's true for me, that I feel like when I'm writing and I'm in that flow, that zone that I think most writers want to enter when they're going deep into the story they're telling, I feel like that's sort of the best version of myself. Not what's on the page, but how I feel about myself in the world. I would love to carry that with me everywhere. Does that make sense to you?
It does, because the world kind of falls away.
It does.
And you are in your space, but it's almost like you're not even writing anymore. It's like something is happening to you and you are creating. And the keyboard is sort of a vehicle, but something's happening and you are in a different space and you're in a different sort of a sense of mastery. And even if you read the words later and think that the words aren't good and need to be revised, you still have that sort of feeling that there's a feeling of control and sort of peace.
Peace.
And then you sort of wake up and then you're back in your real life.
Yes, that's exactly the experience, which is you go into this sort of meditative state and then you emerge out, and I do this experiment with my students sometimes where I say, describe a good day and a bad day of writing, and the good days all sound the same. And the bad days all have the same quality, which is they're aware of the world around them. They're aware of the ticking clock, they're aware of their bills, and they're not in that place at all.
Yeah, and I feel like on any given day, depending on the project, sometimes it's more of a struggle than others because, having the discipline to sit down and do it even when you're not in that state means that the words are there for you later.
Yeah.
For when you revise and you are able to sort of find that state and where the real work gets done.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always happen every day. And I think that, sometimes writers feel that is always where the work has to happen, but it doesn't happen every day. I sure wish it did. And I sure wish I, as you said, could carry that with you to sort of bring out when you need to be really at your best.
Do you find as you get older, let's say just more experienced, although I don't know how not to get older, but as we get more experienced, I find that I can go into that zone more regularly than when I was younger. When I was first trying to get serious about writing. When I was a child, I could do it like that, more or less. But as an adult, I find I'm there more and more and more as I've gotten more deliberate about it. Or do you find it seems to the percentages haven't changed as the more books you write?
I've found that I think that now that I know to recognize it, it's easier to replicate. But when I was a teenager and I wrote a lot, And there was a joy to it that
Yeah.
I kind of wish I had back, because now I do think about things like sales numbers and,
Yeah.
events and cover art and things that are out of my control. And to capture that joy and to bring it back is something that I've been trying to be very mindful about, because I do think that the work is better when you sort of pivoted toward an understanding of creating has to come from a place of
Play,
fun
really.
and joy, yes, and play.
I'm so interested in this particular aspect because writers, a lot of them are very practical people. They want to make a living, but this is what they do. And it's not their intention to sound like a mystic, but when they try to describe what is happening, it just doesn't work. I think I'd said earlier, I was interviewing James Lee Burke last week, and he's like, man, if you start saying, I did this, you are done for, because you have to acknowledge the relationship aspect of writing.
Yeah, there's some kind of access to something.
Something, whatever you want to name
whatever
it.
you want to call that, but and I notice it most when I make a decision early in a book and I don't know why I did it.
And then
I'm like, you know what? And then I just leave it there. But then something happens later where it just kicks in and it makes perfect sense. And it's something that happens outside of you.
Yeah.
And you just do it. And then when you have, either when you're very trusting, like I was when I was a kid, I'm like, yeah, that's fine, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Or when you start to recognize what just happened, then you know to wait.
That's right.
Because sooner or later, why you did that will become very obvious.
That's right. I have learned, even I write essays, and I've learned that I'll have some sentence in paragraph 1, I think, that seems off topic, and then I can tell the difference between the one that really needs to go and the one that's, I don't know why it's there, but I know it should be there, and I'm about to learn why. And this, I will tell you, I have heard that from almost every writer willing to talk about the subject, that the detail in chapter 3 is the perfect one for chapter 15. Miraculous. Oh, it's coincidence, but it happens so often you can't call it coincidence anymore.
No, you can't. And so it has to be something else.
That's right.
And I'm sure that some writers would like to call it just skill or talent, but okay, if that's what you want to call the thing, but it's not me doing it, at least
Right.
not intentionally.
So your work, though, it seems to me to have a thematic thread to it, which is it's dealing with what I think of as contemporary issues, but in non-contemporary settings. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I think that unintentionally, the theme that runs through them all is power relationships.
Yeah.
And history is a really useful way to explore those, because our shared human past is really full of
Some inequities.
things. Yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
so it is a useful way to do it.
That is a fascinating topic, it seems to me, because the question is sort of where does it really come from and where does it not? For instance, R is for rebel. There's a state.
There
And
is.
there's the individual. And who actually has more power? The individual is certainly finding her power in this case.
She is, and she also has this 2 different messages that are reaching her, and the state is telling her, we're doing this for your own good.
Right.
And yet she sort of has this understanding that, well, there's a message and then there's what I sort of know and what I feel, but there's also only so much I can express, because then there will be consequences. And that's often the case, has been the case in history, where people have had to make that decision, and often at a cost.
So I have one more question for you, and what I'd like you to do is finish this sentence. If writing has taught me anything, it's taught me what?
I think I would say if writing has taught me anything, it is that everybody has a story that only they can tell, and at some point in their life, they should tell that story to the best of their ability, because the world needs everybody's stories.